What if I told you that a secret plan involving Zambia's most powerful political family could change the balance of power in Africa, and that Washington and London have been working hard to keep it buried? This is not just about politics, it's about control, influence, and billions of dollars in hidden deals. Tonight, we uncover leaked documents, insider testimonies, and shocking connections between the Lungu family and Western power brokers. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could reshape how you see Africa forever. A secret African power plan has just been uncovered, and it involves former Zambian President Edgar Lungu's family, powerful Western governments, and billions in hidden deals. In this in-depth documentary, we reveal how the Lungu family is allegedly tied to confidential agreements with Washington and London, and the role these deals play in controlling Africa's political future, why the West might be desperate to keep this story out of the headlines, and the ripple effects on Zambia's democracy, economy, and sovereignty. From Lusaka to London to Washington, D.C., this investigation connects the dots between high-level politics, hidden financial interests, and a battle for Africa's future. Subscribe for more political analysis and breaking news from Africa and beyond. A story the West tried to bury. Overview. The idea of a story the West tried to bury suggests a deliberate attempt by Western powers, specifically Washington and London, to suppress information about a secretive plan involving Zambia, potentially tied to former President Edgar Lungu's family. This framing is common in conspiracy theories, where powerful actors are accused of concealing politically sensitive information to maintain control or influence. To explore this, we need to consider Zambia's geopolitical significance, Lungu's presidency 2015 to 2021, and any evidence of Western efforts to shape narratives about Zambia. Zambia's geopolitical context. Zambia, a landlocked country in southern Africa, is a significant player in the region due to its copper wealth, strategic location, and relatively stable political history compared to some neighbors. During Lungu's presidency, Zambia faced economic challenges, including rising debt, particularly to China, accusations of corruption, and democratic backsliding. Lungu's administration was criticized by Western governments and organizations like the IMF for governance issues, including restrictions on opposition parties and media. This created tensions with Washington and London, who often tied aid and investment to governance reforms. Western interests in Zambia. The United States and United Kingdom have long-standing interests in Zambia, primarily centered on economic influence. Zambia's copper mines are critical to global supply chains, particularly for green energy technologies. Western companies, like those from Canada and the UK, have stakes in Zambia's mining sector, competing with Chinese firms. Geopolitical strategy. Zambia is a battleground in the broader US-China rivalry in Africa. The US has pushed for transparency in Zambia's debt restructuring, especially post-Lungu, under President Hakainde Hichilema, while China holds significant leverage as Zambia's largest creditor. Democratic governance. Western powers often criticize African governments for authoritarianism, using aid and diplomacy to push for reforms. During Lungu's tenure, the US and UK voiced concerns over electoral irregularities and human rights issues, which strained relations. Did the West try to bury a story? There's no concrete evidence in the public domain of a specific story about Lungu's family being suppressed by Washington or London. However, the framing of this question aligns with narratives that accuse Western powers of manipulating African politics to maintain influence. For example, media narratives. Western media often focus on governance failures in African nations, which can overshadow local perspectives or alternative narratives. During Lungu's presidency, reports of corruption involving his associates, though not explicitly his family, were covered by outlets like The Guardian and BBC, but these were not necessarily buried. Instead, they were part of broader critiques of his administration. Selective diplomacy. The US and UK have been accused of selectively highlighting issues in African countries to justify intervention or sanctions. For instance, the US imposed sanctions on some Zambian officials for corruption during Lungu's era, but these actions were public, not hidden. Speculative angle. If there were a secret plan involving Lungu's family, it might relate to allegations of corruption or illicit financial flows, which are often sensitive for Western governments due to their own financial system's role in enabling such flows. For example, London is a hub for offshore banking, and Zambian elites, like those in many African nations, have been linked to tax havens. If such a story existed, Western governments might avoid publicizing it to protect their own financial interests or to avoid destabilizing Zambia's political landscape. However, without specific evidence, this remains speculative. Conclusion. The notion of a buried story is plausible in the context of selective Western narratives about African politics, but there's no verifiable evidence of a specific cover-up involving Lungu's family. The West's focus on Zambia during Lungu's era was primarily on governance and debt issues, not a suppressed conspiracy. The hidden network behind Lungu's family. Overview. This question implies a clandestine network, possibly involving political, financial, or international actors connected to Edgar Lungu's family. Lungu, who served as Zambia's president from 2015 to 2021, has a wife, Esther, and 6 children, but little public information exists about their direct involvement in political or economic schemes. Let's explore this by examining Lungu's administration, allegations of corruption, and the broader context of a elite networks in Zambia. Lungu's presidency and allegations. Lungu's tenure was marked by accusations of corruption and cronyism. His administration was criticized for state capture. Reports from organizations like Transparency International suggested that Lungu's allies, including business associates and political loyalists, benefited from state contracts, particularly in mining and infrastructure. Family involvement. While there's no definitive evidence tying Lungu's immediate family, e.g. Esther or their children, to a hidden network, African political elites often operate through familial or patronage networks. For example, Lungu's close associates, such as former ministers or business figures, were accused of amassing wealth through dubious means, which could indirectly implicate family members. Chinese connections. Lungu's government deepened ties with China, securing loans for infrastructure projects. Critics speculated that these deals involved kickbacks or opaque financial arrangements, though no public evidence directly links Lungu's family to such schemes. What could a hidden network look like? In African politics, hidden networks often involve political elites, allies in government, or the ruling party, in Lungu's case, the Patriotic Front, who control key sectors like mining or energy. International actors, foreign companies or governments, e.g. China, Western firms that partner with local elites for resource access. Financial systems, offshore accounts or shell companies, often in jurisdictions like London or Dubai, used to obscure wealth. Zambia has been linked to such schemes in reports like the Panama Papers, though Lungu's family wasn't directly named. Critical analysis. The lack of specific evidence about a hidden network involving Lungu's family suggests this may be a speculative claim. However, the broader context of Zambia's political economy supports the idea of elite networks. For example, mining sector. Zambia's copper industry is a hotspot for corruption, with allegations of mismanagement under Lungu. Western and Chinese firms compete for influence, and local elites often act as intermediaries. Post-Lungu investigations. After Lungu's defeat in 2021, the Hichilema government launched anti-corruption probes targeting former officials. While some of Lungu's associates were investigated, no major public revelations directly implicated his family. Speculative hypothesis. If a hidden network exists, it could involve Lungu's family as silent beneficiaries of wealth amassed through political connections, possibly funneled through offshore accounts or proxies. Western powers might be aware of such networks but avoid exposing them to protect their own economic interests, e.g. London's role in global finance. However, without leaked documents or insider accounts, this remains conjecture. Conclusion. While Lungu's administration was linked to corruption and elite networks, there's no concrete evidence of a specific hidden network centered on his family. The question reflects broader concerns about opacity in Zambian politics, but definitive proof is lacking. London and Washington's African strategy. Overview. This question asks about the broader strategies of the US and UK in Africa, with Zambia as a potential focal point. Western powers have long sought to influence African nations through economic, diplomatic, and security policies, often in competition with rising powers like China. US strategy in Africa. Economic engagement. The US promotes trade and investment through initiatives like the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. In Zambia, US companies like First Quantum Minerals are major players in the copper sector. Countering China. The US has prioritized countering China's influence in Africa, particularly in resource-rich countries like Zambia. During Lungu's presidency, the US criticized Zambia's growing debt to China, pushing for IMF-led debt restructuring. Democracy and governance. The US often ties aid to governance reforms, pressuring countries like Zambia to hold free elections and combat corruption. This was evident in US statements during Zambia's 2021 elections, which saw Lungu's defeat. UK strategy in Africa. Historical ties. As Zambia's former colonial power, the UK maintains strong economic and diplomatic ties. British companies, like those in mining, have significant investments in Zambia. Commonwealth influence. The UK uses the Commonwealth to promote governance standards, though critics argue this is a soft power tool to maintain influence. Financial hub. London's role as a global financial center means it's a destination for African elite wealth, including potentially from Zambia. This creates a complex dynamic where the UK may tolerate illicit financial flows to maintain its economic dominance. Zambia as a case study. During Lungu's presidency, Zambia's growing debt to China, over $6 billion by 2020, alarmed Western powers. The US and UK pushed for transparency in Zambia's debt dealings, partly to limit China's leverage. After Hichilema's election in 2021, Zambia secured an IMF bailout, aligning more closely with Western economic frameworks. This suggests a Western strategy of using financial leverage to counter Chinese influence while promoting governance reforms. Critical perspective. The narrative of a secret plan suppressed by Washington and London could reflect skepticism about Western intentions. Critics argue that the US and UK prioritize their own interests, e.g. access to resources, countering China, over genuine development in Africa. For example, selective outrage. Western criticism of Lungu's governance may have been amplified to justify intervention or to weaken Chinese-aligned regimes. Financial complicity. London's role in offshore finance means the UK may turn a blind eye to African elite wealth, undermining its anti-corruption anti-corruption rhetoric. Conclusion: Washington and London's strategies in Africa focus on economic influence, countering China, and promoting governance reforms. In Zambia, this manifested as pressure on Lungu's government over debt and democracy. While there's no evidence of a specific secret plan involving Lungu's family, Western powers' broader agendas shape Zambia's geopolitical landscape. How Zambia became a geopolitical battleground. Overview: Zambia's status as a geopolitical battleground stems from its strategic importance in the US-China rivalry, its copper wealth, and its political transitions. This question explores how Zambia became a focal point for global powers. Historical context. Colonial legacy. As a former British colony, Northern Rhodesia, Zambia's economy was shaped by copper mining, with Western companies dominating the sector post-independence in 1964. Cold War era. Zambia was a frontline state in the Cold War, supporting anti-apartheid movements while navigating US-Soviet tensions. Post-Cold War, Zambia's democratic stability and resource wealth made it a target for Western and, later, Chinese investment. Lungu's era and geopolitical tensions. Chinese influence. Under Lungu, Zambia deepened ties with China through infrastructure loans and projects like the Tazara Railway. By 2020, Zambia owed China over $6 billion, raising concerns about debt dependency. Western pushback. The US and UK criticized Lungu's government for corruption and authoritarianism, partly to counter China's growing influence. The IMF withheld aid during Lungu's tenure, citing governance issues. 2021 elections. The election of Hakainde Hichilema, a pro-Western leader, marked a shift toward alignment with the US and UK. Hichilema's government secured an IMF bailout and prioritized debt restructuring, reducing Chinese leverage. Why a battleground? Copper. Zambia is one of the world's top copper producers, critical for electric vehicles and renewable energy. Both Western and Chinese firms vie for control of its mines. Debt diplomacy. China's loans to Zambia sparked fears of debt trap diplomacy, where infrastructure is seized for non-payment. The West counters this with IMF-led restructuring. Political influence. Zambia's democratic transitions, e.g., Lungu to Hichilema, are seen as tests of Western-style governance versus authoritarian models supported by China. Critical analysis. The battleground narrative may exaggerate Zambia's role to fit a geopolitical agenda. While US-China competition is real, Zambia's challenges, e.g., debt, corruption, are also domestic. The focus on external powers risks overshadowing local agencies, such as Hichilema's reforms or civil society's role in the 2021 elections. Conclusion: Zambia became a geopolitical battleground due to its resources, debt dynamics, and political transitions. The US and China compete for influence, but the secret plan narrative lacks evidence and may oversimplify complex local realities. Leaked documents and insider revelations. Overview. This question suggests the existence of leaked documents or insider accounts revealing a secret plan involving Lungu's family. No such documents are publicly verified, so I'll approach this speculatively, drawing on patterns of leaks in African politics. Context of leaks in Africa. Panama Papers, 2016. These leaks exposed offshore accounts of African elites, including some from Zambia, though Lungu's family wasn't directly named. Luanda leaks. 2020 documents revealed corruption by Angola's Dos Santos family, showing how leaks can expose elite networks. Zambia-specific cases. Post-2021, the Hichilema government investigated Lungu-era corruption, but no major leaks implicating Lungu's family have surfaced. Hypothetical scenario. If leaked documents exist, they might reveal financial misconduct, offshore accounts or shell companies linked to Lungu's associates or family, possibly in London or Dubai. Geopolitical deals. Evidence of secret agreements with China or Western firms, though this is less likely given Zambia's transparency under Hichilema. Western complicity. Documents showing US or UK awareness of corruption, but inaction to protect their interests. Critical perspective. The absence of verified leaks suggests this question may stem from conspiracy theories or unconfirmed rumors. Leaks are often politicized, used by rivals to discredit opponents. For example, Hichilema's allies might amplify unverified claims about Lungu to justify probes. Conclusion: no credible leaked documents or insider revelations support a secret plan involving Lungu's family. The question reflects a broader distrust of elite opacity, but lacks substantiation. The money trail. Billions in disguise? Overview. This question implies illicit financial flows, possibly involving billions, linked to Lungu's family or administration. Let's examine Zambia's financial landscape and allegations of corruption. Zambia's economic context. Debt crisis. By 2020, Zambia's external debt reached $12 billion, with significant portions owed to China. Lungu's government defaulted on Eurobond payments, exacerbating economic woes. Corruption allegations. Transparency International and local watchdogs reported widespread corruption under Lungu, particularly in mining and infrastructure contracts. Offshore wealth. African elites often use offshore havens to hide wealth. London, as a financial hub, has been linked to such flows from Zambia. Possible money trail. Mining contracts. Allegations of mismanagement in Zambia's copper sector suggest elites profited from opaque deals. Lungu's associates elites, not necessarily his family, were implicated. Chinese loans. Critics speculated that infrastructure loans included kickbacks, though evidence is scarce. Post-Lungu probes. Hichilema's government seized assets linked to Lungu-era officials, but no billions tied to Lungu's family have been publicly confirmed. Critical analysis. The billions in disguise claim is likely exaggerated. While corruption under Lungu was documented, the scale suggested here lacks evidence. Western financial systems, including London's, may enable such flows, but no specific trail links Lungu's family to billions. Conclusion. Allegations of a massive money trail are speculative without concrete evidence. Corruption in Zambia's elite circles is plausible, but the focus on Lungu's family appears overstated. Africa's political future at stake? Overview. This question frames the alleged secret plan as having continent-wide implications. Let's explore how Zambia's situation might reflect broader African trends. Zambia's role in Africa. Democratic model. Zambia's peaceful transitions, e.g. 2021 elections, make it a democratic benchmark in Africa. Resource politics. Zambia's copper wealth mirrors resource-driven geopolitics in countries like the DRC or Nigeria. US-China rivalry. Zambia's debt and political shifts reflect broader African dynamics, where global powers compete for influence. Implications for Africa. Debt and sovereignty. Zambia's debt crisis highlights risks of dependency on foreign loans, whether from China or the West. Governance. The push for democratic reforms in Zambia could inspire similar movements elsewhere, though authoritarianism remains a challenge in many African nations. Resource control. The scramble for Africa's minerals, e.g. copper, cobalt, will shape political alignments, with Zambia as a key player. Speculative angle. If a secret plan involving Lungu's family exists, it could symbolize broader efforts by global powers to control African resources through local elites. However, this risks oversimplifying Africa's complex political landscape. Conclusion. Zambia's challenges reflect broader African issues, but the idea of a single plan determining the continent's future is speculative. Local agency and global competition will shape Africa's trajectory. Conclusion. What happens next? Summary. The questions posed suggest a conspiracy involving Lungu's family, suppressed by Western powers, with Zambia as a geopolitical battleground. However, no verifiable evidence supports a specific, secret plan. Zambia's significance lies in its resources, debt dynamics, and political transitions, which draw US, UK, and Chinese interest. Corruption allegations under Lungu are documented, but claims about his family or billions in disguise lack substantiation. What happens next? Zambia's trajectory. Under Hichilema, Zambia is aligning with Western economic frameworks, pursuing IMF-backed reforms and debt restructuring. This may reduce Chinese influence, but risks domestic backlash if reforms falter. Anti-corruption efforts. Ongoing probes into Lungu-era corruption may yield revelations, but a major leak implicating his family seems unlikely without new evidence. Geopolitical dynamics. Zambia will remain a battleground for US-China competition, with its copper wealth and political stability at stake. Critical perspective. The narrative of a secret plan reflects distrust in global powers and local elites, but it may distract from addressing Zambia's real challenges: debt, governance, and equitable development. Future revelations, if any, would require rigorous verification to avoid fueling misinformation.